Hey everyone, and welcome back. So, I have a special topic for this month. We're going to talk about acute injuries. And what acute injuries mean is a injury that you suffer recently. All right. So, I had a personal situation about 1 week ago. The situation was that I injured my foot. All right. So, let me tell you how this happened. Okay. So, about a week ago, I was joking around with my wife. We have a certain relationship that we can joke around with each other. I was talking a little bit trash to her, just innocent trash, just joking around. And as I was talking trash to her, I was leaving the room. And when I was leaving the room, what ended up happening is that I hit my foot, specifically my left foot, on the door frame. And that got my attention because, I'm pretty sure a lot of you have done it before. Hit your toe on the bedpost, chair, something solid, right? Get your attention, right? I've done that too before, but this one felt a little bit different. It kind of ached a little bit more than my usual toe jams that I have done in the past. All right. So when I did that, I was like, you know what? I better take a look at my toe. And I took off my sock. And when I tried to move my toe, it hurt. It hurt. It hurt pretty bad. I was like, you know what? Let me take a better examination. So I went ahead and looked at the skin, looked around, and right below my pinky toenail, there was a little purple dot. Now, you're not supposed to have purple skin, right? So to me, that's a telltale sign that it's a little bit more of an injury than just a jam toe. So my concern was, okay, maybe it's my nail. Maybe I jammed my nail or just, lifted up. So pressed on my nail. Yeah, it hurt a little bit, but my nail was intact. I didn't see any bruising underneath the nail. So I was like, okay, if my nail's fine, there's no bruising underneath my nail bed, and the purple was more on the skin below the nail, then it's two things. One, I just bruised it, or two, it's broken. So I ended up doing a little self-care. I buddy taped my toe, put some ice on it, I elevated it, nothing more than that. But even though I did that, the pain was still kind of intense. Not like overly bearing, but it was enough to get my attention where I was like, you know what, this has been hurting a little bit longer than what I expected to hurt. And I think I need to go see the doctor. So because I don't have X-ray vision, that's the reason why I need to go in. I need somebody to take a look at it. Now, is this an emergency? No, it's not. So I waited till the next day. So I went in the next day. I got the X-ray done, and when I got it done, the doctor came in, and sure enough, they told me that yes, I have a broken toe or a fractured toe. What they told me, and basically what that means is that now I cannot run. Right? Runners love to run. That's the worst thing you can tell them, so that you can't run. All right. So they buddy taped my toe. They put me in a what they call a post-op shoe, and what that is a type of shoe that has a very firm sole. And the idea behind that is just to support the foot, so the foot can't bend to cause more movement of that broken toe. Now, the thing is, when I did that, I'm in a situation, right? My situation is that I have a full marathon in about 8 weeks. So I was on par of getting my PR. I did it very well in my half marathon, close to my PR. And I was thinking, okay, this is the year that I'm going to PR for my full marathon. Well, that broken toe is definitely putting a dent in my training program. So because of this situation, now I need to accept the fact that I have a broken toe and I can't run and I can't train like I normally would if my toe was fine. So that's pretty hard for us runners, right? Is that you're suffering from injury, you've been training for 5, 6 months to be able to run a race, and especially to try to PR. And that took a blow, right? So now, because of that, I accepted that. Now it's time for me to set realistic goals. All right. Now my goals are that I will continue on training. I'm going to try to prevent myself from losing all that training I have done for the past 5, 6 months. And it's very important to do that because if you don't, then the chance of you being able to run a full marathon once you're able to run, it's just not going to happen because you're going to end up hurting yourself. So my realistic goal is that, yes, I will be able to run that full marathon. However, it may not be my best and I may not do my PR, which I'm okay with that because there's always next year to try that. Now that I set realistic goals, I understand my situation. Those are the key things to understand. All right. So the three things you need to do when you suffer an acute injury is one, take care of yourself, self-assessment. So you look at your injury, you examine it, and you look for key things. One is that if you have any kind of bruising, any kind of deformity, meaning that let's say your toe is like sideways, uh, pain lasting more than half a day, even more than 2 hours, those are telltale signs that your injury is pretty significant. Okay, that's the first thing. Once you do that, you want to address it by doing what they call the RICE, rest, ice, compression, elevation, right? And then if you're not allergic to stuff, you could take certain type of medication. Um, Now, the next thing is that once you identify that maybe it is a significant injury, you need to go see a medical professional to have them determine whether it is or is not. Because if they determine that it is not a significant injury, then hey, that's great news, right? That means you can go ahead and gradually go back into your normal routine. You won't miss, but maybe a few days of training, and then you can go back to your training and achieve your goal or achieve your PR or finish that full marathon, right? But if they do find a significant injury, then that's going to change things of how you address your next training and how you go to train and whether how soon you can get back into training. Okay. So the third thing is that once you accept the fact that you're injured, you need to adjust your goals. You need to modify your goals. You need to understand that, yeah, you're injured. You may not be able to do your best, and that depending on the type of injury, you may need to rest extended period of time or a short period of time. And let me explain what I mean by that. Okay. So in my situation, right, I broke my pinky toe. That's a good thing, actually. Why? Because the pinky toe is not what they call a load-bearing toe, at least for me. Some people are a little bit different, but for me, the pinky toe is not a load-bearing toe. So that's promising. That means my recovery can be fairly quickly because it's not a load-bearing toe. So let me explain this a little bit more, what I mean by that. So when we run, most endurance runners go from a heel to toe motion, okay? And when you go from that heel to toe motion, it goes from the heel to the great toe. The great toe is your big toe, right? The big toe is the push-off toe. Because I tend to run that way, that's a good thing because that means the stress on that pinky is not going to be high. So what that means is that because it's not going to be high, the chance of me injuring it or causing more harm or delaying the healing is less. Now, does that mean I can go ahead and start running right now? No, it does not mean that. It just means that I can get back into my normal training routine quicker than if it was a load-bearing injury. So let's say if I broke my big toe, no, you need to rest that 4 to 6 weeks time frame for the bone to heal correctly. Because if you don't, it could cause issues to the point where you may not be able to run for months. Okay. In addition to that, if the bone doesn't heal right, then it requires surgery for them to correct it, and that's going to put you even further back in your training. Okay. Now, this is not a blanket for everybody because not everybody pushes off on the great toe or the low-bearing toe. Because my low-bearing toe is my great toe, but somebody else's low-bearing toe may be actually the pinky toe. Some people do run that way, where they push off on the lesser toe. And what I mean by lesser toe is every toe besides the great toe or the big toe. So let's say if I was a runner that pushes off on my lesser toes. Well, now I have a situation. Now I may need that 4 to 6 weeks of non-weight bearing loading on that foot. Because if I do, and I'm and the low bearings on my lesser toe, then I'm going to cause harm. I'm going to cause the fracture not to heal correctly, and I may require further therapy to get it better. Okay, so again, keep that in mind, that the location, the type of injury is very important in determining how quickly you can get back into training. For me, fortunately, it's my lesser toe, which I don't push off of. Okay, it's not my low bearing toe. So I'm in a certain situation where I can get back to training fairly quickly. Not too quickly, but fairly quickly. So those are things that you need to keep in mind when you suffer from a recent injury. Okay, again, you treat it, self-examination. Okay, basic treatment for any kind of injury is, they say, the RICE, rest, ice, compression, elevation. Okay, if you're having pain longer than 6 hours, you need to go see somebody. If you have bruising, if you have any kind of deformity, if you have loss of motion, all those things, you need to go see a medical professional to rule out severe injury. If they say the injury is not severe, great. If they say that, yeah, you have a fracture or something more severe, then you need to listen to them. You need to understand that it's going to take some time to heal, and that depending on the type of injury will determine how fast you can get back into your training. So here's one other example I'll give you. Let's say you had a fractured femur bone. It's a long bone, okay, on your thigh. If you fracture your femur bone, you're out, okay? Especially if you have a marathon with within 8 weeks, even 20 weeks, you're out. That's a long haul recovery period, because that bone is a extremely low bearing bone, and if you jump into training too soon, you're going to cause that bone to give out, break again, and depending on how it breaks, that can actually cause you to die because there's major blood vessels in that area. Okay. So again, everything is very dependent on the location, the type of injury, to determine how soon you can get back into your training. All right. So if you have questions about anything, feel free to contact me under that. I hope you learned something, and you guys take care. Until next time.